All right, I'm going to call to order the regular meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education. It's Monday, December 18th. First, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Next, we'll review and approve the agenda. Can I get a motion? Erica, Penny, second. All in favor? Next, we're going to approve the minutes. We've got 2 minutes to approve. So first would be for the December 4th, 2023 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes? Laura, second. Penny. All in favor? Unanimous. And then we've got to approve the December 11th, 2023 minutes as well. Can I get a motion for that? Julie, second. Penny, all in favor? Excellent. Moving on to comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside some time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker with a maximum of 15 on each subject. Anybody like to come forward? Seeing that we have none, we'll move on to reports and recognition.
Yes, and it is my pleasure to introduce our friend and insurance expert, Joe Spurgeon. Joe's been with the district for about 6 years, I think at this point, 6-7 years.
Yes.
And he is our trusted advisor and consultant and helps us to understand a very complex sub-organization of our organization, I guess we'd call it. As you know, we run a self-insured plan, and so having somebody with Joe's experience and expertise really helps us to make informed decisions as we think about our budget. So we invited Joe to come talk to the board a bit, to give us an update on how we're performing this year and to walk us through a couple of the data points that he uses. Joe, you have the slide, I believe, on the laptop right there.
Oh, okay,
it's just
yep.
the PDF, the 2 sheets,
Perfect.
and we have hard copies of that in front of us as well.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for being here, Joe.
Oh, thank you. All right, so thank you for having me. Just wanted to first talk a little bit about what I do for you, because I know there's some new board members. So my job is I assist in budgeting as one of my main functions. So we'll be working with the board over the next several months to put together a budget for 24-25. I know that healthcare expenses are a big component of that. And so throughout the process, I'm sure many of you will kind of see how we get to those projections and how we get to them. Just for those new folks, you are a self-funded plan. What that means is that you are liable for all the claims that are incurred by your employees and your retirees on the plan. We do use Cigna. Cigna is really just like a third-party administrator for us. What Cigna does is they provide us access to their network of providers at their discount levels. So we get to access Cigna providers at their discount levels. They do kind of build the benefits, but we negotiate that with the union. So all the benefits that your employees experience are benefits that you've negotiated with your unions. But Cigna builds those into their system and then adjudicates the claims as they come in. They handle customer service issues as well. So we work with you during negotiations to help you kind of strategize what those benefit packages should look like. We also do day-to-day issues if things pop up. Somebody's having a claim issue. We work with employees directly or with the union sometimes or with management to help kind of clean up those issues. A lot of what we do nowadays is related to compliance as well. So there's certain things you have to do with the Affordable Care Act or COBRA benefits, and so we support the district in that fashion as well. I'm going to talk about claims today and kind of where we're seeing things go. We are seeing a little bit of a pickup in claims. We'll talk a little bit more about that. It might likely have some impact in our 24-25 projections as we start to work through that with the board over the next several weeks, but we'll kind of talk about that. As I talk about claims, just understand that you're liable for the claims that are incurred by the employees. We do purchase stop loss. We're actually combined with the town for our stop loss, so we work with the town. The town is separate, by the way. The town uses Blue Cross. We use Cigna. They're their own self-funded plan. We do come together for the purpose of stop loss insurance. And what stop loss does is that protects the plan, it protects your self-insurance fund from large claimants. And so we have a $300,000 stop loss policy. If any one member, so an employee or any of their dependents, incurs medical or drug claims equal to 300,000, you're liable all the way to 300,000. Once we hit the 300,000, Voya is our stop loss vendor. They're responsible for any claims over 300,000. Okay, we do pay a premium for that. It's a big part of our budget is looking at large claims and the impact that large claims and stop loss premiums have on your budget. Particularly now I work primarily with public sector groups in Connecticut. Particularly now, really large claims is what's driving the vast majority of changes to a plan. So if you're seeing increases or their plan staying flat, it really has to do with how many large claimants you have, how much change in large claimants you have, either more or less or the same. And that's really what's driving things. So as I go through this a little bit, hopefully that gives you a little bit of a knowledge on how the plan works and why it's important to you to understand how the claim numbers work and how that impacts your budget. By the way, if you were fully insured, claims are just as important. You're a large enough group where your claims would really drive the vast majority of your premium cost. The difference is that on top of the fees that you'd pay Cigna to administer the plan, they would charge margin, right? And they would charge risk components of it. So for groups your size, we really do find that self-funding is the most appropriate way for you to manage a health fund. And especially groups like you that have had strong reserve policies in the past, right? Making sure you have funds available if claims are higher than what we expect them to be. And that does happen. So you should have a sheet, 2-pager in front of you. We'll start on, were they stapled, Sean? Were they stapled? Not front and back? Okay, so the first sheet, it's got some colors on it. So one interesting thing about New Canaan is you're a September plan year. So your plan runs September through August. The reason why that's interesting is the vast majority of public sector groups out there are July plan years, right? They have their plan year tied to your fiscal year. Years ago, I'm not sure how long ago, before I got involved, you guys moved over to a September plan year, and which is fine. You can work it that way. But sometimes when I'm talking about claim costs, I usually refer to plan year because that's how I budget. It's based on the plan year. A lot of times you guys, right, are thinking about fiscal year. So what this sheet does is you'll see some color coding. Like the first column, you'll see part of it's green and part of it's salmon or pink. The green actually tied to the fiscal year, and when the green and pink together are the plan year, right? So you can see you're actually missing 2 months for 2018, but you can see that September through June were part of the fiscal year, right? July through June. And then if you connect the pink in column 1 and the pink in column 2, that's your full fiscal year, right? And then you'll see at the bottom what I do is I sum up the fiscal year. So you can see both how we're running for the plan and how we're running for the fiscal year, okay? On this sheet here, we're showing you net paid claims. And what that means is if somebody went over stop loss, I'm only reporting claims up to the 300,000. So we're not reporting anybody over the 300,000. On the next page, I'll show you claimants that actually went over the 300,000. I don't know that we need to go through every single column, but what I'll show you is if we kind of focus maybe on the last two, and then I'm happy to kind of refer back to some others if you'd like me to. I will point out a couple of things. But if we start from the second column over to the left, 2022, 2023, that was your most recent completed plan year. We did see a high plan year. So if you look at the bottom of the plan year, you'll see $14,925,000. That's where our net claims ended for the full plan year last year. You can see that's higher than the previous columns. You'll notice it's much higher than 2019-20. 2019-20 might sound a little familiar to some of us. That was our COVID year. And what we did see during the COVID year was we saw, and you can see it here, we saw a significant drop-off in claims April through June. And that was across the board, across the country. That wasn't just a New Canaan thing. Interesting enough, just while I'm talking about that, we saw that drop in claims, at least in Connecticut. We saw that roll into the following year as well. New Canaan didn't really see that. So you guys kind of returned back to normal before a lot of other groups did. So we did see a pickup in claims in New Canaan fairly quickly. If anybody ever listened to healthcare trending, people were talking about how it really took almost a full year for claims to return to normal. You guys got there a little bit faster. So we ended at 14,925,000. Again, that was your total claims. That includes medical, drug, and dental claims. That was nearly 30% higher than our lowest month, 1819. I'm sorry, second lowest month. 38% higher than 1920, which was our COVID year. 12% higher than 2021, and about 8.5% higher than 21-22. Those numbers might sound huge, and they're big. We'd love for them just to be flat every year. But just understand healthcare trends are between 8 and 9%. So per year, unfortunately, is kind of what we use for trending going forward. So we're maybe a little higher than some of those initial years. But I think COVID had a little bit of impact on that as well. So even though we're higher than we'd like to be, I'm not overly concerned that there's anything significantly wrong in the plan. And we'll talk about what's driving that shortly. If we look back to 22-23, what really kind of drove the big increase from 22-23 to 21-22 was the second half of that plan year. So the second half of that plan, if you look from March down, you can see is much higher than the first half of the year. In fact, it was 30% higher. We always expect, so you guys will have me come out and talk to you, and I'll always talk about, hey, the closer I can get to September, the more confident I am with my numbers. The problem is you guys can't wait till August to do your budget, so you need me out here sooner than that to talk to you about it. But when we do budgets, we look at the most recent 12 months of claims, so that's what we're always looking at. And the reason I want to kind of draw us to your attention is, as you'll see, so for every month that I get closer to really, let's call it July, but really September, then I can drop a month, right? So if you look in the blue column on the far right, you can see that I have 3 rows of data, right? September through November. So when we added November 23, I drop off the November next to it, right? So next month I can drop, in January, I can drop that 1.2 million from December and add whatever that number is going to be. So one of the nice things is that we kind of work our way through the process, 2 things happen. One is I get to use newer claims that are more accurate, and then also impacts the trend assumptions that I make. What I want to try to draw to our attention here is that that second half of the year is not going to go away, right? So those highest months that we have are going to be a factor in our budget this year. And I'll talk a little bit more about those months and what happened last year. But it's one of the reasons why I said I think we're anticipating maybe a higher increase this year than maybe we've seen in the past. But we're working through that a little bit. It has to do with that second half of the year. So just some more back on to 22-23. We had 55. If you go to the next page, we'll kind of flip back and forth. I'm going to jump around a little bit. If you go under section 2, here I talk about catastrophic claimants. Catastrophic claimants we define as anybody over 50,000. And if you see that in section 2, that you see that 14,925,000, that was your liability. Of that 14,925,000, 6.5 of that, 6.492, was for high dollar claimants. So claimants who had claims over 50,000. The other 8.4 was for non-high dollar claimants, so everybody else. You'll see a number just below that, 1,490. That's the average number of members that you have on the plan. A member we count as not just the employee, but all their dependents, right? So I'm one subscriber, I'm one employee, but I have a family of 4, so I'd represent 4 members, right? So of the 1,490 members we had, 55 of them were large claimants. That's 3.69, oh, thank you. That's 3.69% of your membership, driving 43, almost 44% of your cost. And if you look, that's higher than the previous years, right? So we're higher. We had 7 new claimants over 50,000, but we also saw an increase in the percentage of members and an increase in the percentage of dollars. Overall, that number is not overly alarming to me. It's pretty consistent with what we see now. So we see, 3.5 to 4.5% of the employees driving between mid-30s to mid-40s% of costs. So you're kind of right in the norm that we see, but we did have that jump, right? And I think a lot of that's what's attributing to last year's higher than expected claim cost. If you pop back up to the top of that section now, staying in that second to the left column. What we show here is what we expected the claim cost to be. So 14,536,000 was our projection. That number below, that repeated 14.5 can actually go away. You'll see it in the next column when it's there. Our actual gross claims came in at 16,126,000. Of those 16,126,000, 1.2 of those were actually over the 300,000, which you were not liable for, right? So Voya paid that 1.2 million. So that's where you get your net 14,925,000. We ended the year about 2.7% over expected claims, or $389,000. You can see the previous year we were about the same, over almost 3%, a little bit over for 2021, and then way under in that COVID year. While we're looking at those numbers, you'll see 18-19 was under by almost 14%. If we had some other columns on this page, you see those numbers were under as well. And what that really reflects is we migrated your employees over from a traditional copay-based plan to a HSA plan. And we did that over about a 4.5-year, 5-year period, starting with the teachers. And so what happens is as we make those transitions, there's actuarial factors that say, hey, here's how much you're gonna save when you do those things. We were just a little conservative because claims are your liability, right? Not actuarial factors. And so we were conservative as we planned for those years. And so our budgets were a little conservative in those years. Since then now, really beginning in that 19 and definitely in that 20 year, we now, I think all of our experience with a handful of retirees as the exception, are now in the HSA plan as the only plan available. Below, so let's go back to the second column to the left. Below that, you'll see individual stop-loss premiums, $1.65 million. So I said before, as we talk about large claims and stop-loss, it is a very important aspect to the budget. So for that protection, right, for buying that protection of protecting you against any claim over 300,000, last plan year you paid almost $7 million for that. You'll see out they paid $1.2 million, so the stop-loss carrier did make a little bit of money on that. One of those claimants was a very large claimant, over $1 million. That claimant is no longer on the plan. So we'll hopefully, even though there have been some large losses for the stop-loss carrier, we're hoping that'll factor into our discussions with them going forward. So usually I'm pretty conservative this time of year when we start talking about stop-loss, but having our largest claimant come off the plan will be helpful in our discussions with the stop-loss vendor. And then I'll jump to the bottom, so sorry to jump around a little bit, but that last section, we just bucket those large claimants. So we just break them into different buckets between 50 and 75 and down the line. What you can see last year is we had 4 members over the 300,000 for the total of 2.4 million in total claims, and our largest claim was 1.3 million, and that's the claimant that's no longer on the plan. In this last column, important note, so we expected claims to be 14,883,000 for this current plan year. That 3.7 below is just a straight annualized or de-annualized projection. So if we take the 14.8, divide it by 12, and multiply it by the 3 months of the plan year, we say claims should be $3.7 million. It's not really fair. It's not very technical, but it's a good test. And the reason why it's not fair is, I said before, the vast majority of your employees are in HSAs now, and what you might know about HSAs is they have deductibles. And so it takes employees a while to hit their deductible. So we tend to expect that as the plan year goes on, claims will increase as people start to hit their deductible. But I put it there just as like a simple test to see how we're kind of running against the plan. And you'll see here that we're actually running 7.4, if you jump down a little bit, 7.4% under expected right now on a straight annualized basis. What I would say is that, typically with 3 months in, I'd like to see you in the high single digits, maybe low double digits on that. So, maybe we are running a little bit over expected given where we are, but we'll keep our eye on claims over the next couple of months. Let's see if I had anything else important to talk about. Oh, sorry, so as we go down, so the sections below, like those will become more mature as we go along, right? So having 12 people over 50,000, that number is going to get much bigger, right? We'll approach the 30s and the 40s. So it doesn't mean a whole lot right now, but we'll keep our eye on that as well. Right now, our largest claimant is at 234,000. So still a ways away from the HSA, but not too far, from the stop loss, but not too far, with our next one following at 156,000. Any questions?
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
So with the high dollar claimants, so right now we're at about 3.7% of total, up from 3.15 as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Are those distinct? I mean, how much overlap do we see from year to year?
We'll definitely see some. So looking at that, we know the largest claimant's no longer on the plan. I know the second largest claimant still is, and it's a little
Is
hard.
that the second largest as of last year?
As of
or
last
from-
year, yeah,
I mean,
as of-
so historically, let's say the past 3 years, have these individuals continually been
Yes.
among the high
It's-
dollar claimants?
Typically, at least half of those large claimants will reoccur year to year.
Okay.
It's a little hard to tell because we don't get identified data.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to map to diagnoses. And sometimes the diagnosis can change. Like the primary diagnosis for somebody with cancer might be chemotherapy one year, and then it might change back to their cancer diagnosis. So sometimes it's kind of hard to tell. But looking at it, of the highest claimants, it appears about half of them are still on the plan and contributing to the larger claim buckets,
Gotcha.
working their way up towards those 50,000 or higher.
And then, so what percent, you said a high percentage have migrated to an HSA plan?
Yeah, it's all active employees, all under 65 retirees, I believe.
And what's the high deductible, and how has that how's that evolved over time as we've seen more people go to HSA plan?
Yeah, you might have started you might have been at 15.3 when it first started. Moved to 2,000, 4,000, and now it's at 2,250, 4,500 for the vast majority.
Okay.
Those
And
are
so-
single family, sorry, 2,250 for
mhm.
single, yeah.
Yep. And so, and that's a change from last year to this year? Is that the,
By contract, actually, the last contract, we didn't change the deductible amounts,
and when was that, I
most
guess?
employees. 2 years ago,
So 2 years and no change
yeah.
for the high deductible, okay.
But the premium does.
Yeah.
And we also have the copay after deductible.
Yeah, so when you're in negotiations, obviously, there's lots of different factors that come into play. I would say that the 2250 is become kind of the standard public sector deductible level. You guys did get there probably before most other districts did. Additionally, you guys have co-insurance after your deductible, which is unique in the public sector in Connecticut. So after an employee hits the deductible, they continue to pay 10% of their in-network claim cost.
Now, another question I have, I'm sorry. So of the high dollar claims, the ones that actually trigger the stop loss, what's the average claim amount?
Oh, average. Well, 2.4 divided by 4, right? So 600,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so if we have an average of, or sorry, do you know
But
the
it's
median?
probably not.
I'm
not a
assuming that's
lot
an
of
outlier.
people.
So do you know what the median claim amount is?
I don't remember the exact breakout. Actually, maybe I do. Hold on a second. For last year. Yeah. So for last year, besides our 1.3 million, the next three were 405, 369, and 322.
Okay.
The next closest, if you want to know, was at 285. So we had somebody who was pretty close but didn't go over.
Okay. And so the next amount of stopgap level, right, would be what? So 300K, what would the next one be? Would it be 4? I mean, what increments does it increase?
Anything you want, really.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What I will say is 300,000 is high for a group your size. It's probably high in the state. I've got one other client that's almost twice your size, and they're at 500, which is really high. So yeah, 300,000 is a higher attachment point.
Okay.
I would say if you didn't ask, but if you wanted to ask,
Well,
the average in Connecticut for a group your size, give or take 50 to 100 employees, is probably 150 to 175,
Okay.
maybe 200, a few of them. So you're much higher. And that's a function of your reserving, right? It's a function of your planning over time, your reserve levels over time, setting your reserves over time. It doesn't
then-
mean you've done anything right or wrong. It just means that your risk tolerance has been higher because you've had a strong reserve position.
Yeah. And so I guess how does the premium for the stop loss, how does that change? What's the correlation between obviously the level and price?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, is there
80%
a
of
point
it-
in which we maximize or we become more efficient in sort of
80% of it's based
Based on what we're
on,
using.
on the actual large claimants. So the stop loss vendors, especially like Voya, because they've been your vendor for a few years now, they know the claim history of the people that are, that they're paying claims on. We also do share some claim data with them on other large claimants, so they know the diagnoses of patients. So the vast majority is driven based on your actual employees and their claims experience.
okay.
But that's not to say if you had no losses at all, you wouldn't still have stop loss premiums, right? The risk is, and Brian and I and Sean were talking about this earlier, I work with about, call it 16 different public sector entities. One of them is a large coalition with like 9 groups, but I would say all but 2 have $1 million claimants, right? So you don't really know when that next $1 million claimant's gonna come on. So stop loss has really become, there's a lot of risk in their assumptions.
But they're underwriting the individual members, not just,
I would say that's driving about 80% of it, right? 80% of your.
it's not just an
your
actuarial calculation. It's
Correct.
actually,
Correct, which has changed over time.
Yeah.
10 years ago, if you asked me that question and you were with Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield, they had a pooled stop loss product. And your experience had very little impact on your actual stop loss premium rate. It was a completely pooled product across all of their public sector business. That's changed over time.
gotcha.
And drug costs are a really big piece of stop loss now, where it used to be hospital claims would drive those large claimants.
So,
I should have looked better, but I think at least 2 of the large claimants, their claims are attributed to drug costs, not medical costs.
so if that's the case and our largest claimant has moved off the plan, then why is the stop loss premium increasing so much if it's based on historical
He
data?
just came off, that member just came off the plan.
Okay. So this would be adjusted downward, or is that paid in advance? Is it paid in arrears? Is it paid monthly? How is that calculated?
The premium set for the
Because
year.
it seems like, I mean, given the outliers, a lot of it around 300, a couple around 400, and then there's an outlier.
Yeah.
It's $1 million, so they're
And-
presumably driving the premium cost.
Yeah, premiums are set for the year, so we'll pay, roughly that 1.8 million, 1.9 million in stop loss premiums. We do test the market. We go out to bid to check the stop loss market, along with the town.
Well, is it possible to retest the market given we had such a large claimant come off?
Yes, and so that's a big piece of what we'll do this year. If unfortunately, I want to negotiate with Voya in a public meeting, but right, Voya will know that, okay, the largest claimant came off. We've been taking that loss for a few years now. If they go to market, a new carrier is not going to care about that anymore. So it puts them in a competitive situation. But we've already changed stop loss vendors twice since we combined with the town. It's the nice about stop loss change is it has 0 impact on employees. Right? If we change stop loss vendors, the employees don't even know about it, right? It doesn't impact their services at all.
So I'm sorry, just to belabor the point, but, so we've already paid the 1.8, almost 1.9?
Well, you're paying it monthly. It's
We're paying it monthly, so again, are we locked in to pay that? Could we switch at any time, sort
for
of
the
mid-contract?
no, you got locked in for the plan.
We're locked in for the
For the
contract,
plan
okay,
year,
that's
yeah.
fine.
So through August.
All right. Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Sorry, Brendan.
Hey, Brendan.
Yeah, it's not really a question, I just wanted to highlight something that I always look at, and I'm sort of, comforted by the number, which is the high dollar claimants per member per month line, which, I just went back and looked at 424 from 18 to 19, going to 471.57 last year. That's about 2.7% per year over the last 4 years. So I think that's actually lower than I would have thought. It obviously goes past COVID time frame, but it's actually better than I would have thought, given that we've, all these years essentially have our, HSA program, and there hasn't, to my knowledge, been a lot else that we've been able to do to reduce costs. So I guess one question for you, Joe, is there anything that we've done over the last, 4 years or so that has reduced costs?
Yeah, actually, I wish I would have printed it out. We had a nice document that maybe we can share at some point, Sean, with the board. I think over the last, is it 10 years, Brian? 10 years, we're up to about an estimated $12 million in savings. That includes migration to the HSA. That includes some migration that we did with getting retirees who were on your plan, who were teachers, who could go to the teacher retirement board, who voluntarily, didn't force them, but voluntarily migrated to the teacher retirement board plan. Includes negotiating discounts, fee offsets with Cigna, stop loss changes. So that's a document that we can definitely share. But I think it's up to 12, maybe a little bit over 12 now, as of last year.
Just one follow up. As we look forward, are we more likely to be on sort of the, whatever it is, 6 to 8%, or maybe even higher kind of healthcare cost trend increase, or, do we think we can stick with something that's closer to, low to mid single digits? Any sense?
Yeah, so as I'm looking at things right now, so I expect annual trends to be about the same, which will be, 8.5 to 9-ish, maybe a little bit higher for annual trends. So that'll be kind of our inflation factor before we factor in any change in claims. What I am a little bit concerned about is just those large claims in the second half of last plan year. So those are going to kind of weigh us down as I start to prepare the 24-25 budget. So perhaps it'll be higher than we're used to seeing.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
And what's driving you mentioned, maybe I took you off your train of thought, but you had mentioned that you were going to explain sort of why we're seeing higher.
Yeah, sorry. It's those large claimants, right? It's those new large claimants over 50,000 that are really driving. They're really driving the increases.
So after reaching the high deductible, is that it? So what,
No, just having more over the 50,000, right? Those 7 more claimants, and you can see, right? So,
but I guess what
we
causes
jumped up
the
over almost
seasonality
$1
of it?
million, right? If you look at the high dollar claimants from 2023 to 2021, 2022, 23 to 21, 22, right? That number's $1 million higher.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're mentioning, like, I guess what causes sort of seasonality of it? I mean, why do you feel like the second half is going to be much higher?
No, I'm saying when I do projections for your 24-25 budget, I use the most recent 12 months of claims, right?
Yeah,
And
you
so-
roll them. Yeah, you roll it.
Yeah, and so every month that I add, I get to drop one. But what I'm saying is, we won't have enough months to add to absorb the second half of last plan year. So those are going to remain in our projection.
Oh, when you do preserve, gotcha.
Yeah,
Understood.
and we will spend more time kind of diving onto your other question of how many of those are repeated claimants. Like I do know one large claimant now was a newborn. Like that claimant, probably isn't going to keep recurring. So, what assumptions can we make about that? So there are things that we can look at when doing the projection at that level, which we haven't gotten to yet.
And to piggyback a little bit off of Brendan's point, are there other things, there's a lot of focus, I know, with like corporate plans with sort of, preventative sort of care, right? And sort of incentive programs. I mean, are there opportunities to do that, to give incentives or benefits for, healthy lifestyle choices or sort of gym memberships, things that would be additive to the employees, but also help reduce cost?
Yeah, you have a very active wellness committee, probably one of the most active that I'm part of. There's 15 at least people on that committee. They're very active. The way you guys mostly operate it is you kind of have an overall budget, and I don't want to steal any thunder, but you have an overall budget for the wellness committee, but then each school gets to manage one. So you do have those types of programs, which focus on lots of things from just general nutrition, wellness education, a lot of mindfulness stuff. So you've done a very good job in that respect. Cigna does a pretty good job at communicating to employees about preventive services like colonoscopies and mammograms and those types of things. But, you know, no matter how good your wellness program is, you know, you're only as good as the people you can capture. And sometimes the problem with wellness programs is, you know, the guy who runs a marathon is the first guy to sign up for the wellness program, and that's maybe not our target all the time. But yeah, I think you're doing all that you can, and you're doing a good job. I shouldn't say all that you can, but you're doing a very good job with what you can do from wellness. It's a very active group.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
I'm just curious, the high dollar claimants number, if you just roll from 2018 to now, just seems like it's steadily increasing. And you said that's not unique to us. That's probably something that's going on in all public sector entities and maybe more broadly. And I'm just wondering what's at play there, and wouldn't you think that number does that number have a potential to sort of flatline, or is this kind of the new normal for us?
I don't know that I'm prepared to say yet, but I have seen it increasing. I don't like the jump of 7. Right, that was a big jump for you guys. What's driving it? Costs for people who have conditions that become high dollar claimants are becoming more expensive, especially drugs. You know, you throw a specialty drug in there, and almost anybody who's on a specialty drug is going to be a high dollar claimant now. And that person may be perfectly functioning, right? Like you might not know they're ill because that specialty drug is managing their condition very well. So it's not like, oh God, we got a bunch of sick people, right? There are people that are managing their chronic conditions fairly well. You know, I was in a meeting with Cigna 2 weeks ago, and you know they mentioned that, you know, not to belittle it, but you know, years ago, you know, cancer claimants were on the plan for a year, and then unfortunately, you know, many of them came off the plan. Now, you know, many cancers, not all, obviously, but many cancers are managed like a chronic condition. You know, you might have cancer, you're still going to work, you might have to take a few days off here in a row, but, you know, so those claimants will stay on the plan a lot longer, which is fortunate for them, but they are costly. Yep.
Related to that, I'm wondering about the threshold of 50,000, and has that been the threshold throughout the time, and wouldn't that need to increase if the underlying costs are increasing?
Yeah, it's still a small number, right? It's less than 4% of your total population. So I haven't jumped to like, okay, let's start calling high dollar claimants 75 yet. But you could at some point say, okay, well, do we just change that number, right? Do we change that to 75,000? We haven't got there. The industry hasn't. So pretty much consistently in the industry, if you said, oh, I have a chronic, what's your high chronic cost? They would say 50,000. But like I said, it's easy for one drug to be 50,000, right? So yeah, at some point, do we just increase that number? Don't know if that helps our conversation at all, because they're still driving our cost.
All right, we're good. Thanks so much, Joe. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And Joe has offered to join the Resources Committee for a meeting in early January prior to the presentation of the budget, so we'll work to get that scheduled. So we can talk about the projections a bit more, and Joe can talk about his hurricane model.
Yeah, my hurricane model. That'll be a fun one. All right,
Thanks,
thank
Joe.
you.
Great, thank you. And moving on, statement of accounts with Sean O'Keefe.
Evening, everybody. So not a heck of a lot of change since the month of October. So as of November 30th, our operating fund expense actuals are 34.7 million, or 33.6% of our budget of 103 million. An additional 61 million, or about 59% of the budget, is encumbered at this point, leaving a remaining available balance of 7.6 million, or 7.4% of the budget, which is fairly consistent with balances a year ago. On an attainment basis, as I mentioned, 33.6%, that compares to 33.4% in the same period last year, so would indicate that we're remaining on track toward budget. Having said all that, there are 2 accounts that we're continuing to monitor. One is special ed outplaced tuition, which is running a little bit high. Year-to-date actual is $1,045,000. Encumbered at this point, $2.333 million. total, actual encumbered 3,378 versus a budget of 4,371. So compared to prior periods, we seem to be running a little hot there, so we're going to continue to monitor that very closely. The second, which we just addressed, Joe just addressed, is relatively high claims in the last several months, so we're going to continue to watch for that. As Joe mentioned, as each month progresses, 1 month from the previous year drops off, so we're hoping that these subsequent claims are lower than a year ago, and we'll gain a little ground. So those are the two areas that we're going to be focusing on, continuing to monitor for any concerns. Questions? Thank you much.
Thanks, Sean. All right. Moving on to action items. The first action item is the budget assumptions and related priorities in the second read.
Okay, so we reviewed by hitting some of the high points in conversation last meeting, but glad we made one adjustment on page, oh, they're not numbered, I need to number them. Goal 5A, just breaking those up by sort of recent mandates versus existing mandates that require ongoing focus. Apologies for that. And so that one little change, but beyond that, open for further discussion at the will of the board.
Any thoughts, questions? So do we make a motion?
You've made the motion, it's just a vote to accept.
All right.
Move.
So move to accept the budget assumptions and related priorities as a second read. All in favor? It's unanimous. Passes. Next, the district calendar.
Great. So below that, you should have the 25-26 district calendar. After talking together with the administrative team, after the board meeting last, 2 weeks ago, what we've done is adjusted the convocation to be August 21st with a professional learning day on the 22nd and on the 25th, and then our first day of school on the 26th. By doing so, it moves our last day to the 16th of June, which gives us the 3 days if needed. As today reminded us, you just never know what the weather's going to be like on any given day. We would look to do our new teacher orientation the 3 days prior, 18, 19, 20 in August, and our administrative retreat a couple of days before that in the week prior. So those are the adjustments we made after the board's discussion and taking a look at it.
Great, thank you. Any questions, thoughts? Yes.
There's the note at the bottom that says that we'll take away from the April vacation if shortened by more than 7 days. Is 7 the right number,
Nope.
given the change?
No, we'll take a look at that and fix that. Thank you. That should be 3. And as you know, and we've discussed this, the way this calendar falls is constricting for a variety of reasons. We have a policy that asks us to do all, when reasonable, not go past the 3rd week in June. If this was a year that we had a hurricane and had a long duration closure, the state would require us to do that, and the state would override the policies. And they do have districts go to the end of June, the last possible day, but we try not to have to do that. So if we do go past the 3 days, there's a few other levers we can pull, as we've discussed. The total number of student days can be adjusted, or days could be taken out of the April break.
Great, thanks. Yep, Ara.
So sorry, just out of clarity, so is this 182 days with 3 built-in snow days, or is it 182 days with 1 built-in snow day?
This is a calendar for 182 days.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions? All right. So move to take a vote on the 2025-26 district calendar. All in favor? Looks like it's unanimous. Okay. Moving on, the Facilities Board of Education Special Committee Charter as a first read.
Yes, thinks in Board of Education bylaws, there's a process for us to put new committees together. And after thinking about the multiple requests that have been coming around facilities, whether it's new facilities or enhancements, improvements, or other opportunities through public-private partnerships, we felt like having a committee of the board to specifically hear these ideas and opportunities and help with the administration to prioritize and bring them back to the full board for consideration. That would be very helpful. As a matter of fact, we were just talking with Joe. He sits on a committee in his hometown that does similar work around capital improvement. So the charge for the committee would be to learn about, understand, and make recommendations regarding short and long-term facility needs district-wide, driven by the projected elementary enrollment increases, right? So as we continue to look at that larger class coming into kindergarten and the new sort of resetting of our incoming classes, the continuous improvement of programs, for instance, our libraries at our elementary schools, other areas, the studio downstairs here in the building, other areas that were state-of-the-art years ago, but could use some attention, I think, in order to keep up with the expectations of the programs. And then opportunities that are presented through public-private partnerships. We know the NCAF has been very busy and active and very helpful in fundraising and bring projects forward. And this would be a place where they could bring those projects forward for consideration and discussion prior to coming for the full board for approval. So to have a group together to do that as a committee and hear these things and provide feedback to the different groups considering the work, I think would be very helpful. So deliverables would be to review those needs, to evaluate the enrollment projections, understand capacity constraints and other challenges that we have in our buildings given what we're anticipating in enrollment, and then to prioritize and make recommendations for the full board. Just like all committees, there's no authority beyond the full board. We intend to meet monthly during the school year and probably more frequently in bursts as projects come forward at different times. And as a brand new committee, it's a first and second reading, similar to policy. And then it would be a special committee for the first year. And then if it's going to be continued, it would become a standing committee. So just like we do with policy, we need a motion and a second, but we don't vote tonight.
Okay, like to motion to accept as a first reading the Facilities Board of Ed Special Committee Charter. Penny, second. Lara? Great. Moving on to comments from the public. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Brennan.
Yeah, I just had one question, which is, and we don't have to talk about this all tonight, but I just wonder, are we supposed to have a more, robust committee? This says 2 people, just a question whether we should have at least 3, if we could find the people who are willing to do it. And then the second is, do we want to have something just knowing what the enrollment projections look like? Do we want to have something as this kicks off over the course of the next year that's more prescriptive in terms of when we want sort of a report back or something like that? I don't know if that's the best route to go down, but just something that popped in my head.
Mm-hmm. On the first question, where you're right, it says the committee will be comprised of at least 2 Board of Ed members. All of our 3 standing committees have the similar language, and we do typically appoint 3 to it.
I got it.
And the second, I think, makes an awful lot of sense. I think one of the initial charges for the committee when it first gets together could be to put together a calendar for deliverables, because you're right around timelines. We could admire the problem for too long and miss a window to make a change given the enrollment projections and things. So I think once we have the committee together, at the first meeting, we can have that conversation and put together a calendar for feedback to the board formally. Yep.
Great. Thanks.
Penny?
So I just had one comment as you're developing the budget for the presentation in January. Just one thought, and sort of coming out of having Patrice here at a recent meeting, and it just strikes me that we've had, we always have their last-minute changes that the legislature puts through, and there've been a couple lately, that have been costly. One changing the burden of proof in special ed cases, to me, was a huge, and not the changing the burden of proof, but changing who has to go first. And doing, to me, is my guess is that a lot of the legislators who voted on that did not understand, how that changed and how that changed the finances. And similarly, maybe with the school lunch and the change of the required 30-minute mandatory period. And I don't know how to do it without burdening, our administrative team, which already has so much more to do. I just wondered if there might be just something that we should budget for or think about, so that we would get appropriate alerts and be able to mobilize, at the appropriate time. And I just thought other superintendents might be thinking about it. Maybe there's something we could do, or we could ask CABE to do, or just something. And there could be budgetary implications on it. So that was all that, I had seen changes of. And I'd love, without having to spend hours and hours reading these legislative updates, to have the opportunity to have something flagged where we could make calls and try and get some action. So just a thought. I have no idea what the solution is, if there is one, but I just wanted to throw it out there.
I've had conversations with my colleagues for the last couple of years that are similar to what you're saying. I think, given the state of things today, I think there could be some possible solutions out there that we'll pursue a little bit. So thank you. It's a good thought. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other comments? All right, moving on to comments from the public. Seeing none, move on to announcements and future business.
Yes. First of all, this is our last meeting before the holidays, so happy holidays, everyone, and happy New Year. We have our recent graduates returning on Thursday morning for breakfast here at the school. We have a meeting down at the College and Career Center, if you can make it, first thing in the morning, and then they will be meeting here in the Wagner Room with our members of our senior class, talking about their experiences and opening up for Q&A so that the seniors have an opportunity to learn from our recent graduates about the college experience and what they wish they knew when they were seniors that they know now as recent graduates and college students. And it's always an excellent morning for everybody. Our next meeting will be January 8th, where we'll have the superintendent's budget presentation. And prior to that, we'll have a resources meeting, as we said. But beyond that, we're looking forward to a break and the holidays and relaxing and enjoying ourselves. Hope you all do the same. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. All right, can I get a motion to adjourn? Matt, second Penny, all in favor? Awesome. Have a great holiday, guys. Thank you.